Yes, welcome to Neurodiverse Spirituality. In this month, we're talking about deconstruction. So, spiritual, it's a strange word, strange idea. Some of you may be very familiar with it, some of you may not be. Depends what's attracted you here, if you know this is the term we're looking at. But what I'm thinking about with spiritual deconstruction is the process of questioning and taking apart spiritual or religious ideas or beliefs. It's quite difficult to draw a line between what I mean by spiritual and what I mean by religious, and they do overlap quite a lot. By spiritual, we're talking about how we connect with the spiritual realm, how we connect with the divine, connect with God, and with our creator, with creation, and so on. Religion tend to use and tend to think of, and some people tend to think of, more in terms of hierarchy and rules, and but when you talk about practices, they could be religious practices or spiritual practices. So there's quite a lot of overlap with that. And some people use religion quite negatively, but I think there's quite a lot of caring in religion and quite a lot of and positives in that, as true religion is caring for the poor, caring for social justice, and connecting with, and is a way to connect with God. So there's a lot of overlap in those. But what I mean by deconstruction is this whole idea of asking questions and thinking through the practices and the ideas of how we do that, of how we might connect with the divine, how we might connect with each other, connect with God, and what we actually believe and think about those things. And quite often people will hear some teaching and put that into practice and really benefit from that and think that's and that is fine. But some people have then begun to think things through themselves, and quite often spiritual teachers and religious teachers will encourage people to think things through themselves. The issues happen when someone does that and comes to different conclusions to those that were teaching them in the first place, and then some interesting discussions arise, which can be very fruitful and good, but could also be quite difficult and lead to disagreement, particularly if someone's quite dogmatic in their beliefs and thinks they are, and think they are right in what they believe, and think the other beliefs could be in some way detrimental to someone. And sometimes those people, have, the best interests of people at heart. Other times people might be in situations like that, might be manipulative, might be being narcissistic, and building a hierarchy. Maybe they're not really aware of that sometimes, and sometimes they are. So this is what it's this process of questioning and thinking through for ourselves that is really what we mean by deconstruction. It comes from philosophical ideas of things like Jacques Derrida and postmodernism, and the idea that, what do words mean? What do we mean when we say certain things? But it's come to mean, in any spiritual practice, any religion, it's come to mean people thinking through things themselves and maybe finding some of the ideas wanting and deciding to take out those ideas, saying we don't really need to think, we don't really need to do that, we don't need to believe certain things. That's why I've put this image up of a Jenga game. And sometimes we can think of this and think of our spiritual practices or our faith as like a game of Jenga. When we begin to question things, that maybe we don't need some of the bricks and we can take them out. A big problem with that, though, is that as you take out the bricks in Jenga, it comes to a point where the whole thing collapses. And that's where a lot of these ideas about deconstruction have come in and sometimes got a bad reputation, in that people have said, oh, if someone questions something, then eventually they'll end up not believing anything. They end up saying, oh, I don't want to follow any spiritual practice. I don't think there's anything, you know, even the spiritual realm perhaps doesn't exist. And so I think that though I've put that image up there, and it's often characterized in terms of deconstruction, it's like a game of Jenga, it is problematic. I think another important aspect with deconstruction is that when we say it can result in someone rejecting all of their previous thinking, some or all of that previous thinking, it also leads to, if it really is deconstruction, holding new ideas more lightly. So if someone questions one religious practice and then decides, oh, I'm rejecting that and going to a different one, and I'm holding it just as dogmatically as I did before, I don't think that's quite the same as what people mean by deconstruction, because deconstruction is partly coming to realize that these are opinions and not facts. What you've embraced as facts, as a way to have spiritual connection and whatever, as you've realized, is your opinion, and other people have different opinions, and other people have different experiences. And so we hold often, when someone's rethought something, they now hold those things less dogmatically than they did before. And that's certainly been my experience as I've rethought different ideas that I've had. Though early on, I've gone from one dogmatic idea to another. More recently, I've realized just how much lighter I need to hold things. So click on to the next one to look at neurodiversity. How might that link into what we're talking about? Well, as we've said a number of times, neurodiversity simply means that some are more likely, it's just how we think differently. And some people are more likely to think independently than others and not just accept ideas. And I think that's true with a lot of the neurodiversities that we've talked about with autism, for example. That independent thinking is very strong. So that's an important part of it. So maybe neurodiverse people are more likely to question things and think things through themselves. Being ADHD, autistic, or otherwise neurodiverse might also lead to misunderstandings and feelings of being manipulated by spiritual leaders when we're expressing these different ideas and expressing such thoughts where we've thought through something independently. So I think neurodiversity, I think this wonderful little image that I found of when two people are talking, that could be, someone talking about spirituality, and it's two brains that work differently having a conversation can lead to some very interesting disagreements, and sometimes very painful disagreements and hurtful disagreements. And sometimes it can be a complete misunderstanding. Sometimes it can be that someone is manipulating someone else and is trying to exert some sort of authority on people. And I think certainly with my experience of being autistic, as I said, getting a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome several years ago, I've noticed that people can take things more personally than they're meant, and I can talk about something thinking I'm saying something quite abstract, and find that someone takes it as a personal attack and thinking, hold on a minute, what happened there? And I think it can be the way that, you know, and we can talk about some of this, it can be the way that we come over and the way that we are, but then again, it can be the way people take things unnecessarily. But also a number of thoughts and a number of times when we've been discussing issues in neurodiverse spirituality, I think it's come up this feeling of being manipulated, and that maybe people that are neurotypical, or maybe people that, or maybe people also come across people that are narcissistic to some extent, can be ones that are manipulating people, and we may be, you know, very sensitive to that and pick that up. So I think it does raise lots of questions like that I want to, I think it'd be worth discussing and delving into. Was there any thoughts or questions? Next, so you've got the chat there. Yes.
Sorry, I was muted. No, there are no questions in the chat on what you've said at the moment. I think people are saving them for the breakout rooms.
Yeah.
Has anybody got anything that they want to ask David to clarify before we go in?
Yeah, don't worry if you haven't. We'll stop the recording there then.